After my father-in-law's funeral, my jobless wife smiled like she'd won the lottery. She said, "I'm rich now and you're useless." Then she threw divorce papers on the table before I'd even folded his flag from the coffin. 24 hours later, the lawyer called her back in, laughed, and asked, "Did you even read the will?" I was there when her face went pale. The man she thought left her $500 million had actually left her a lesson. My name's Arden Quill, and I never thought the person I buried that week would be the only one who truly saw my worth. The day my marriage ended was also the day I learned what real inheritance means, because it had nothing to do with money. Before I share my story, I'd love to know you're here with me. Comment hi or tell me where you're watching from. Sometimes knowing someone's out there makes all the difference. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. And if this story reaches your heart even a little, hit subscribe and join our growing circle of people who've been through betrayal, heartbreak, and still found a way back to themselves. Because stories like ours deserve to be heard. The air in Tasuk that morning was sharp and dry, the kind that clings to your throat and makes every breath taste like dust and pine. The adobe church sat against a backdrop of ochre hills, its white cross barely visible in the late sunlight. Inside, the smell of beeswax and pinon smoke blended with the faint murmur of people remembering Bo Larkin, the man everyone here swore had built half the heart of Santa Fe. I stood near the front, straightening a wreath from the Southside Community Center, the place he'd poured his life into. My name is Arden Quill, 31, software deployment manager, son-in-law to a man who believed wealth wasn't what you kept, it was what you gave. And as I watched the line of mourners file past, all I could think was how strange it felt that Bo's absence filled the room more than his presence ever had. Maris, my wife, stood in the first row like she owned the air between the pews. 33, restless, dressed in a cream dress that shimmered against the somber colors of the crowd. She hadn't shed a tear all morning. When people whispered legacy, her eyes gleamed not with grief, but calculation. Every time someone mentioned the Larkin estate, her phone lit up in her hand like a nervous tick. I saw her scrolling, smiling faintly, as if counting the condolences like dollar signs. The ceremony moved with quiet dignity. Cecily Romero, Bo's attorney, sat 2 rows back, hands clasped around a worn notebook. I caught her glance, once steady, knowing. When the choir sang, "Nearer, my God, to thee," Maris leaned close to me and whispered, "You know Dad had $500 million tied up. Once the paperwork clears, I'm done scraping by." I blinked. $500 million, I repeated quietly. She smiled, eyes still on the altar. "You heard me. We'll finally live like people who deserve to." Her tone made it sound less like hope and more like entitlement. After the service, I helped the volunteers from Southside carry folding chairs and stack hymn books. They thanked me, told me how Bo's donations kept their programs alive, how he'd funded ramps for the disabled, plumbing for an elder's home, scholarships for local kids. I kept hearing the same phrase. He didn't just build houses, he built people. Maris, meanwhile, was near the parking lot, laughing into her phone under the winter sun, the white of her dress almost blinding. As the last guests left, Cecily approached, her coat collar pulled up against the wind. "Arden," she said softly, extending her hand. "He left something for you." I frowned. "For me, Wednesday," she said. "Canyon Road. He wanted you there before anyone else." "What did he say?" I asked. Cecily smiled the way someone does when they're holding a secret that isn't theirs to tell. "He said you're the only one who looked at his notes and saw what they really meant." That night, as I loaded the leftover flowers into my truck, I thought about those words. About Bo's small, tidy handwriting in his ledger, how he'd written, "Spend only where it makes someone's day lighter." He was a man who measured value in impact, not size. And yet his own daughter stood on that very principal's grave, waiting for a number to save her. I didn't know it then, but that morning's chill wasn't from the weather. It was from the first crack in a marriage built on 2 different definitions of worth. Cecily's words echoed on the drive home, "Canyon Road. He left something for you." I looked in the rearview mirror, saw the string of red chili ristras hanging from the church's adobe wall, swaying in the wind. Bo once told me they were a reminder: season your life, but never overdo it. Too much spice ruins the stew. I just didn't know that soon the woman beside me would be the one burning it from within. By the time I turned into the dim streets of Santa Fe, the question had rooted deep in my chest. What exactly was that 500 million fortune, or a warning? The night after the funeral, our small apartment near the rail yard felt colder than usual. The space heater buzzed under the table as I went through our bills, credit card statements, rent, utilities, all stacked like silent accusations. My laptop screen glowed against the kitchen's pale walls, numbers bleeding red across our budget sheet. Every month ended the same way, my paycheck gone, our savings smaller. I had been working 2 contracts days at the firm, nights coding freelance while Maris stayed home. She said job hunting was pointless until life changes. The door clicked open just before 10. Maris walked in smelling like expensive perfume and bar smoke. She dropped her purse on the counter and kicked off her heels, not even glancing at the table full of bills. Rough night, I asked. She yawned. Just catching up with people who matter now that Dad's gone. I said nothing. The coffee maker hissed in the corner, counting seconds louder than either of us. When I showed her the spreadsheet, she barely looked. We're down again, I said. You spent $400 on skincare, $200 on a resort weekend, and another $1,000 at a spa in Scottsdale. We need to slow down. She smirked, pouring herself wine. Why a few more weeks and I'll have access to the inheritance? You can stop pretending to budget like we're broke. I stared at her. Broke isn't a mindset, Maris. It's math. She sipped. You sound just like him. Bo, yeah. Always about purpose, charity, restraint. He never lived. Her eyes hardened. I will. Her words hit like ice water. He spent his life helping people breathe easier, I said. That's what money should do. She laughed, short, brittle. Then I'll help myself breathe first with 500 million. Later, when she went to shower, I noticed the notifications on her phone screen, transfers, withdrawals. Curiosity turned into dread. I opened the laptop again, cross-checked our joint account. The numbers didn't add up. Thousands missing moved in small sums to a digital wallet under her name. Transactions spread across 3 months, the same months Bo had been hospitalized. My throat tightened. When she came back, I asked, "You've been moving money?" She shrugged. I took care of Dad. You think candles and rides to the doctor pay for themselves? I said quietly. The caregiver I hired did the bathing and the driving. You were busy posting brunch photos. Her face went blank. You're accusing me. I'm asking for honesty. I deserve something, Ardan, she snapped. I've been stuck with your boring paycheck while waiting for my life to start. I stared at her, this woman who'd once said she wanted a life that meant something. Now she only meant more. I didn't argue. There was no point. Every word I said only made her dig deeper into the illusion that money would rewrite her character. Instead, I did what Bo once taught me: stay still when the storm comes. I backed up our financial records, printed the statements, and locked them away. If the inheritance wasn't what she thought, she'd already built her own trap. That night, as she fell asleep scrolling through real estate listings in Taos, I sat on the couch looking at an old photo on my phone, Bo and me installing the ramp outside his house. His hands had been steady despite the tremor of age. Spend wisely, he'd told me, not loudly. I understood him now more than ever. Through the window, the Santa Fe lights flickered like restless stars. Somewhere between their glow and the silence of our apartment, I realized the countdown had begun, not to wealth, but to revelation. In 2 days, we'd be on Canyon Road for the will reading. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what I might lose. I was ready to see what she'd built her entire world on, and how fast it would crumble once truth took its first breath. The morning light in Tasuk slipped through the blinds like liquid gold, catching the edges of Bo's old cedar desk. That smell, cedar and paper, always reminded me of the way he spoke, calm, grounded, practical. It was the morning before the will reading on Canyon Road, and I sat in the quiet of his study, the room still filled with his presence. On the far corner of the desk was a sealed envelope with red wax, my name written in his handwriting, deliberate and steady. I had seen it before, months ago, when he'd first asked me to help organize his project files. I hadn't dared open it then. Now I knew I had to. I ran my fingers across the grain of the cedar drawer and opened it. Inside were documents, loan agreements, community project reports, and one thick folder labeled Southside Community Center Recovery Plan. Bo had always been proud of that project. He once told me, "If I can give people a place to learn and work, it's better than leaving them checks they'll waste." The folder contained the financial guts of that dream, a signed pledge stating $500,000 pledged as collateral to restructure community liabilities. Not inheritance, not cash. It was collateral, a promise against a debt. The room seemed to tilt for a moment as I pieced it together. The entire city believed Bo had $500 million sitting idle in a vault. Even Maris. But the truth was different. Months before his death, supply chain failures and rising interest rates had nearly sunk his community initiative. He had mortgaged everything he owned to keep his workers employed, to keep those community buildings from collapsing mid-project. The bank had given him a grace period, 2 years, to restore the balance before foreclosure. In the corner of one document, I found a handwritten note. "If I don't get to explain this myself, make sure someone does, and only when the moment is right." That's what he meant when he told Cecily to contact me separately. He'd never trusted Maris to handle nuance. To her, everything came in 2 colors: win or lose. I could still hear his voice from that afternoon months ago. He had been sitting right there, a mug of black coffee in hand, eyes tired but alive. "I didn't tell Maris," he said, "because she'd turn my funeral into a gold rush. She won't understand collateral or grace periods, just numbers. You do. You see purpose where others see totals." He paused, looked at me the way a mentor looks at a student he wishes were family. "So when it's time, let the truth speak for itself." I closed my eyes and remembered nodding silently that day. He'd smiled faintly and added, "Every inheritance carries a test. Some people inherit the money. Some inherit the meaning." Now, back in the stillness of his study, I unfolded one last page, a typed addendum marked, "For executor reference." It was a clause Maris didn't know existed. Any personal allowance granted to a direct heir would be paid monthly, contingent on proof of employment or active training for at least 20 hours a week. Without it, no payment, no exceptions. Even the small stipend Bo set aside for Maris came with responsibility. And that massive $500 million that wasn't for anyone to spend, it was already working, already pledged to others. It wasn't a fortune to inherit. It was a debt he'd embraced for the sake of people who'd never know his name. For a moment, I wondered if I should warn her. Maybe spare her the public humiliation that was bound to come. But then Bo's note came back to me. "Only when the moment is right." If I told her now, she'd twist it, claim I was manipulating the will. She'd learn nothing. So I locked the papers back inside the cedar drawer, sealing the truth behind a layer of polished wood and quiet resolve. Outside, the wind carried the dry rustle of Chile ristras swaying on the porch. Somewhere a bell rang in the distance. The countdown had begun. By the next morning, the legal storm would start, and the man she thought I was, the useless husband, would be the only one who knew what she was walking into. That night, the house in Tisuk felt more like a museum than a home. The guests had long gone, the scent of flowers turning bitter in the still air. The lamps cast a honey glow across the floor, soft but lonely. I was gathering the framed photos of Bo from the mantel, him at the groundbreaking of Southside, cutting the ribbon with children crowding around, when the door opened. Maris stepped in her heels, clicking against the tile, her perfume thick and confident. She'd changed out of her black dress into something sharp and bright, almost celebratory. There was something in her eyes, relief disguised as triumph. Without a word, she placed a stack of papers on the table between us. I didn't need to look to know what they were. "Sign it," she said flatly. "You're not part of this anymore. I don't need a man with a paycheck when I'm about to have $500 million. The words didn't sting the way she wanted them to. I just looked at her, really looked at the woman who'd once promised me partnership, now talking like a stranger. "Are you sure you don't want to wait until the will is read?" I asked quietly. "I already know what it says," she shot back, chin lifted. "Don't act like you understand business, Ardan. Dad took care of me." I nodded slowly. "He did," I said. "Just maybe not the way you think." She sighed in irritation, crossed her arms. "You've always been jealous of what I deserve." Her voice carried that brittle mix of pride and fear. I signed the paper, the pen scratching across the line like a closing door. "File it yourself," I said. "Send my things when you're done." As I turned toward the hallway, a gust of wind from the open window flipped one of Beau's photos face down. I bent to pick it up, and a slip of paper fell from the frame. His handwriting again, small, calm. "Stay steady when the storm comes." I slid it into my pocket and walked toward the front door. Behind me, Maris's voice softened almost to herself. "You'll regret this when I'm gone." "I already have," I said, not turning back. Outside, the air was cold, the string of chili peppers twisting in the breeze like red lanterns. I paused on the porch just long enough to hear her phone ring inside. Her tone changed instantly, lighter, conspiratorial. He signed. "You'll get your share once the money clears. Just keep quiet." I stood there in the dark, the sound of her laughter cutting through the quiet like a knife. So she had a partner in this, someone waiting for their piece of the dream. Maybe an old friend, maybe a creditor. It didn't matter. The shape of greed was always the same. As I walked to my truck, I glanced down at the signature on my copy of the divorce form. Beneath it in fine print was the date and clause, effective 24 hours after final signature. I froze for a moment. That meant she'd already filed the petition earlier, only waiting for me to complete it. 24 hours. That was how long it would take for my name to disappear from her life, just as the illusion of wealth would soon disappear from hers. I sat in the driver's seat for a while before starting the engine, my hands resting on the wheel. No anger, no bitterness. Just a quiet, steady pulse of clarity. Beau once told me, "Sometimes losing is the only way to keep your own soul." Now I understood. Through the windshield, I could still see the faint glow of the house behind me, the home that wasn't really mine, filled with things that never belonged to either of us. Somewhere inside, Maris was probably toasting her freedom, believing she'd traded up. But I had seen what she hadn't: the papers in the cedar drawer, the truth waiting to undo her illusions. By the time that clause took effect, and by the time the bank locked the accounts, her empire of air would vanish. And when the storm came, as it always does, I would do exactly what Beau had asked. I'd stay steady. By the next morning, the world had rearranged itself into silence. The papers were signed, the house behind me no longer mine, and yet I felt lighter than I should have. I checked into a small hotel near Santa Fe Plaza, opened the window, and watched the city breathe under the winter sun. I told myself this was freedom, but it still tasted like ash. Then my phone buzzed with a single message from Cecily. "The will reading has been moved up. Be ready." Meanwhile, miles south in Albuquerque, Maris was dressed for victory. Her heels clicked across the marble floor of Los Pinos Trust Bank, the kind of place with walls of glass and silence so thick it made you whisper. She was accompanied by her lawyer, a young man with slicked back hair who looked more like a salesman than counsel. They approached the counter, her voice ringing with entitlement. "I'm here to access the Larkin estate account. My father passed last week and I'm the sole heir." The banker smiled politely, typed something, then stopped. The pause was long enough to cut through the air. He checked again, slower this time. "Mrs. Larkin, I'm afraid there's a restriction on that account." Maris frowned. "Restriction? What does that mean?" "The funds are supposed to transfer." The man's tone shifted. "The $500 million in question has been temporarily frozen pending collateral review. The assets are pledged, not liquid." Her eyes widened. "Excuse me, that's my inheritance." The banker cleared his throat and handed her a document stamped in blue ink. "It's collateral for a community redevelopment loan. Mr. Larkin's records indicate the balance was due to be settled this quarter. Until that's completed, the funds can't be accessed." Maris's voice sharpened. "You're saying I can't touch a single dollar?" The branch manager arrived, older, deliberate, holding a file. "Mrs. Larkin, your father used that account to secure employment projects for hundreds of people. The estate isn't bankrupt, but it's not distributable either. In simpler terms, the money is serving someone else before it can ever serve you." Somewhere around that moment, my phone started vibrating in my hotel room. Her name flashed on the screen, the same name that once made me smile. I answered. Her voice came through like a blade. "What did you do?" she screamed. You locked it, didn't you? You're trying to steal from me. I kept my tone even. I didn't do anything, Maris. Have you read the will yet? I don't need to read it. My father would never hand power to an outsider, especially not you. I took a slow breath. Then maybe you should ask yourself why Cecily told you to prepare yourself before the reading. There was silence, followed by the sound of her breathing, sharp, uneven. You're lying, she said, but her voice was smaller now. Your father didn't hide money, Maris, I said quietly. He used it. You just never noticed where. She hung up. Minutes later, another text came in, this one from Cecily. Arden, come to Canyon Road immediately. There's a clause they haven't read yet. 3 hours. I closed my bag and grabbed my jacket. As I stepped out into the cold, the world felt like it was finally catching up with the truth I'd been carrying. At the same time, in the parking lot outside Los Pinos Trust, Maris stormed toward her car. A man was leaning against it, a familiar face I recognized from old photos. His name was Grant, a real estate broker Bo had fired years ago for falsifying contracts. Maris froze when she saw him, so he said with a crooked smile, heard the gold mines locked. She crossed her arms. It's just temporary. He laughed low and mean. You said you'd have the funds by now. I put in $100 grand to prep that Tau steal you wanted. If I don't get it back this week, I'm filing fraud. She blinked fast, her confidence cracking. It's coming. I just need a few days. Days you don't have, he said, stepping closer. You played the wrong hand, sweetheart. That money was never yours. When he drove off, she stood there, trembling, clutching her phone. For the first time, she looked less like a woman waiting for wealth and more like someone realizing she'd been the last to understand the rules. Back on the highway to Santa Fe, I felt my phone buzz again. Cecily had sent me a photo, a handwritten page from Bo's will. If any heir refuses to face the truth, the bank has the right to suspend all assets until the accompanying condition is fulfilled. The condition was attached in a second image, the clause I had found in the cedar drawer. Employment or training 20 hours per week or forfeiture. Bo had predicted everything, the entitlement, the blindness, the crash. He hadn't written a will for a daughter. He'd written a mirror for her to finally see herself. As the mountains appeared on the horizon, the sky began to glow with the color of iron turning to fire. I thought about calling her, giving her a warning. But then I remembered Bo's words. Truth needs the right setting to be heard. By the time I reached Canyon Road, the wind had picked up, carrying dust and cold light through the art district. The next few hours would decide everything. And somewhere in Albuquerque, Maris Larkin was beginning to understand what it meant to inherit a dream she had never believed in. Cecily Romero's office sat tucked between 2 adobe galleries on Canyon Road, its walls lined with paintings of open skies and broken mesas. When I arrived that afternoon, the sun was low enough to paint everything gold. Inside, the air was tight, the kind of silence that hums before something breaks. Cecily greeted me with her usual composure, though I could see the fatigue behind her eyes. She's already here, she said quietly. Maris sat at the far end of the long wooden table, her lawyer beside her phone, face down, knuckles white. She didn't look up when I walked in. The representative from Los Pinos Trust, Mr. Fields, adjusted his tie and opened a briefcase full of documents. Cecily cleared her throat. Let's begin. The reading started with the standard language, formal, impersonal. Then came the division of assets, personal property, charitable allocations, and finally the estate fund. Maris's impatience bled through every breath. Can we skip to the part where it says my name? She snapped. Cecily glanced up. We'll get there, but you may want context first. I don't need context, Maris said. I just need the number. Cecily's eyes softened with something like pity. Very well. Under Section 3 Estate Financial Holdings, the document states, the $500 million held under Larkin Trust are pledged as collateral for ongoing community development obligations. She looked at Maris directly. Do you know what collateral means? Maris blinked, confused. You're saying I can't access it? I'm saying it isn't money sitting in a vault, Cecily replied. It's what your father used to keep hundreds of workers employed when the markets collapsed. He didn't hoard wealth. He recycled it. Maris shook her head. That's impossible. He told me I'd be taken care of. He did, Cecily said gently. Just not in the way you think. Mr. Fields handed her a folder. Per the conditions of collateral, these funds remain under the bank's control until the obligations are fully met. There is no inheritance in the conventional sense. Maris stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. This isn't real, she whispered. Cecily exhaled softly and then unexpectedly laughed. It wasn't cruel, just a sound of disbelief at the sheer irony. You know, Mrs. Larkin, you filed your divorce this morning. By law, that means you're no longer a spouse at the time of this reading. Therefore, you're excluded from the personal bequest of $80,000 your father left for you. You signed yourself out. The room went still. Maris's jaw clenched, eyes darting toward me. You knew about this, didn't you? I shook my head. No, but he did warn you about timing. Cecily continued, her tone even. To ensure fairness, Mr. Larkin left a separate amount, $40,000, to Mr. Arden Quill for professional and personal assistance rendered during his illness. It's a recognition, not charity. I felt heat rise to my face. I didn't expect, I know, she said quietly. He trusted you to use it wisely. Maris looked stricken, her lawyer whispering something she didn't seem to hear. Then Mr. Fields spoke again, laying a new document on the table. There's one final matter. As of today, the $500 million has been officially transferred to the Bo Larkin Foundation, designated as a permanent community trust. No individual inheritance will be granted. Maris's voice broke. So it's gone, all of it not gone, Cecily said. Repurposed. Your father believed responsibility was a form of wealth. This was his way of teaching it one last time. I reached into my jacket and unfolded the sealed letter I'd been carrying since the funeral. Cecily nodded for me to read. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Bo's handwriting was the same as always, careful, deliberate. If you're reading this, it means you kept your calm when the storm arrived. You were never meant to protect my money, Arden. You were meant to protect its meaning. Thank you for seeing what others couldn't. I stopped. The silence in the room stretched heavy but strangely peaceful. Maris's eyes shimmered, her expression cracking as the truth settled in. For the first time, I didn't see arrogance in her just loss. Not the loss of money, but of the father she'd never truly known. Cecily closed the folder, her voice softening. It's over. Maris stood abruptly, gathering her purse, but before she left, she looked at me. He trusted you more than me, she said. I met her gaze. He didn't trust either of us with money. He trusted us with choices. She didn't reply. She just turned and walked out into the golden light flooding Canyon Road. Cecily packed up the papers, glancing at me. She'll come back, she said quietly. When the illusions fall away, people usually look for the one person who told them the truth. I stepped outside into the crisp afternoon, the sun glowing against the adobe walls. Down the street, a group of children laughed, chasing a paper kite that fluttered in the breeze. Somewhere between the sound of their laughter and the rustle of dry leaves, I realized Bo's plan had worked. He'd made sure his wealth stayed alive, not in accounts, but in people. And in that moment, for the first time since the funeral, I finally felt at peace. 3 days after the reading, I drove to Southside at dusk, the wind combing through the high grass like a tired hand. The lot looked smaller without Bo's voice in it. Sun-faded signage sagged on its posts, concrete walls blotched with rain scars, the bronze plaque catching a thin bar of light for those who build without taking. I set a taper at the base and lit at the flame, holding steady in the wind shadow of the wall. A handful of local kids in paint-splattered hoodies were scraping graffiti off a doorway. One girl wiped her forehead and asked if I'd known Mr. Larkin. I told her I owed him a lesson in kindness. She nodded like she understood and went back to work. I was stuffing site maps back into a banker's box for the bank when footsteps came across the gravel. Maris. The air around her looked heavier than she did. She clutched a file bag to her chest, hair pulled back, lipstick gone. "You still come here?" she asked, like it was an accusation. "This is the part that's mine," I said. "Not money. The reason I helped him." She glanced at the plaque, then down at the dust on her shoes. "The bank says I can still get $2,000 a month," she said, voice tight, "if I'm employed or in training. No one will hire me. Can you tell them I worked at your company? I took my time answering." The volunteers' rollers thudded on drywall in slow rhythm. "I'm not going to lie to fix a lie," I said. "If you want the stipend, earn it. They're hiring trainees here. Ask." Her mouth trembled. She opened the file bag. "Grant is threatening to sue," she said. "He wants his seed money back for the Taos deal, 60 grand. He says I misrepresented. If I don't pay by the end of the month, he'll file." I felt something settle into place, the missing cash from our joint account withdrawn in quiet drips while Bo was in the hospital. "You used that money," I said. "It wasn't yours to spend. Nothing was ever mine," she shot back, then sank onto the raw concrete step like a string had been cut. I kept telling myself it would even out when the inheritance came. I built my life on a number that didn't exist. I opened the project binder Bo had left me and pulled a single-page letter addressed to the bank and site leadership. His language was formal but kind. If Maris falters, give her a door back in, but only if she comes to the site and works in good faith. I handed it to her. "He planned for this," I said. "You have a chance. But it happens here, not in a showroom." She read the letter in silence, tears slipping without drama. "He knew me," she whispered. "Better than I wanted him to." She looked up at me, eyes emptied of performance. "You won," she said. "I didn't," I answered. "I just kept the one thing I couldn't sell, my name." Wind sighed through the rebar. A volunteer brought us a stack of gloves without a word and kept walking. Maris sat a long time, then nodded, small and honest. "Who do I talk to?" I pointed toward the site trailer. "Ask for Cruz. Start where everyone else starts." As she stood, the late sun broke through a seam of cloud and threw a gold stripe across the half-built wall. For the first time since the funeral, I didn't see ruins. I saw a job list. I promised myself I'd stay until the kids didn't need promises. Later, as I taped shut the banker's box, I found one more envelope Bo had sealed for me. On the outside, he'd written, "When you're ready to start over." I tucked it into my jacket and left the flame to finish its small work. 6 months later, spring woke Santa Fe with white blooms on the cholla outside my studio. Morning light poured across the wood floor like water catching dust motes in a framed site plan of Southside now striped with check marks. Phase 1 stood open, a computer lab, a workshop, a multi-purpose room that smelled like fresh paint and cold metal. The $40,000 Bo left me had gone out in a single transfer, seed money for scholarships and machines. I'd written the memo line with a lump in my throat, Bo and Ardon Fund. That morning I opened the last envelope. His handwriting had thinned, but the voice was the same. "When you're ready, use what you have to replant what I started. My money is over. Its meaning isn't." I folded it back into the sleeve and put on my jacket. At Southside, Cecily was already there with Mr. Fields reviewing the Foundation's quarterly report. "He would be proud," she said, handing me a copy. "The bank is recognizing this as self-sustaining. The debt's been retired by operations and matched funds." Outside the glass, a group of teens huddled over a small robot arguing about why it veered left. In the art room, a woman with her hair tied up was helping kids sketch logos on butcher paper. "Maris." She looked up, caught my eye, and gave me a nod that landed like a truce. She met me in the hallway with an envelope. "What I owe you," she said. 10,000. I'm not asking for anything. I just want it off me." I opened it and saw the check, plus a short note in her handwriting. "I found a job. It's not glamorous. It's real. Keep it," I said. "When you cover someone else's tuition or rent, I'll consider the debt paid." Her mouth quirked into something like a smile. "I start full-time next week," she said. "Program assistant. I know where the brooms are now." She started to walk away, then turned back. "Thank you for not humiliating me when you could have." "It wasn't mercy," I said. "It was Bo's design." Cecily waved me toward the courtyard. The board had set up folding chairs and a small podium under a string of paper flags. Families gathered with phones out. The plaque had been polished. The letters threw off fresh light. When they introduced me, I felt the old panic rise, the part of me that prefers code to microphones. But then I saw the kids through the glass wall, heads bent over their projects, and the words came. Mr. Larkin once staked his fortune so other people wouldn't lose a paycheck, I said. He could have left us money. He left us work. I can't match what he risked, but I can match his intent. I put my small share back into this place and got something bigger in return. He traded wealth for responsibility. I traded my anger for quiet. We both made a profit. A few people laughed softly at that. The wind caught the flags, the chimes on the porch clinked against each other like glass coins. At the back row, Maris stood with her hands clasped, eyes bright, not asking for the front anymore.